All right. We are, again, here on a Wednesday episode of Morning Kicker Out. Long ball number 3 is MLS 3.0. Fits the theme today of talking about MLS and the way it operates. Now, I was not able to do the show last week after Don Garber spoke about MLS 3.0 in Austin. I know Robert and Jenny discussed some of the things that Don Garber said in Austin. But what stands out for me, among the talk about changing the roster rules, which we just touched on that. Will things like the discovery process disappear under a new plan, MLS 3.0, and all of those things? Some of the stuff that Don Garber talked about are very intriguing. The calendar switch is probably the biggest fundamental change that MLS could do. I mean, that's going to completely change the business of soccer for them. And I am fascinated by why they think that's such a good idea, what the thinking is behind that. But this is the other part for me. Competition format innovation. Don Garber saying, we've got a really exciting formula. We'll be ready to present once we go through all the formalities of it, which, by the way, I imagine is talking to the players, right? So you're going to execute a calendar switch, which requires the players to be on board. And in that process, you're going to change your competition format. But man, we have no inkling at all. As far as I can tell, most of the reporting on this is just presenting Garber's words and then breezing past it, because I don't think anybody has a sense of what MLS is thinking around this competition formula as Garber describes it. So I'm curious, and I definitely want our viewers, the MK Ultras, to tell me what you might imagine this to be or what you would prefer it to be in a perfect world. He says that they're going to align more with the rest of the world, right? That it's going to be something that's familiar on some level. But he also said the playoff structure is something that is not currently in place in any sport in North America. It'll be more aligned with the rest of the world in terms of how they play their competition. And I think our playoff format will be really cool, really unique, very different from anything that happens in North America. Now this, again, being an old timer, somebody who's worked in soccer for a long time and obviously been a fan, this got me thinking about something that was presented by a friend of mine, Brian Strauss, when he was writing for the Sporting News, I want to say 15 years ago, something like that. He presented an idea for the MLS Cup Playoffs that would involve a group stage. So very much like a World Cup, that you qualify for the playoffs, and then once you reach the playoffs, you are placed into a group, a World Cup style group with 3 other teams. And then getting into the further rounds requires earning enough points in the group stage to move forward. Now, this can get very granular and very detailed. And if you do a search for, say, MLS playoff format, or put Brian Strauss's name in the search field, you will find these articles. There's one at Fox, which I believe was a Grant Wall piece that presented some of Brian's ideas in a different way. Brian himself wrote this at the Sporting News, and I believe he also wrote about it at Sports Illustrated when he was there. Grant Wall talked about this consistently when he was at Sports Illustrated. So what are we talking about here? Now, I don't know that you can separate the regular season format from the playoff format, because Garber's talking about both these things changing. If you've got 30 teams, then I think there's at least some sense that MLS could keep going, although Garber did not commit to that in Austin. He talked more about stadiums coming online for places like NYCFC and that kind of stuff. Then he did talk about expansion, which is maybe interesting because MLS has been so focused on expansion for the last 20 years. But if you got 30 teams, you got 15 teams in each conference. If you play a balanced schedule within the conference, that's 28 games. That's not enough games for a regular season. Now, suppose if you just say, well, we're going to do that, and then we're going to have some crossover games. And that way you can still, have a New York LA match or whatever it is that you want to get, Miami versus LAFC, that kind of stuff, right? If you think that that's important for the business, then you might still have 6-8 games to play with in terms of your regular season. But that unbalances the regular season a little bit, right? Now everybody's not playing the same teams home and away as it would be in a single table format, which I think just because that's how my brain works and I'm a little OCD like that, I love the idea of a single table format, even if you have to split it into conferences, because that's a measure of a team over the season. Now, you can still do playoffs. And I do think as Americans, we should accept that we do playoffs, and playoffs are a fine way to determine a champion. But you want to also make sure the competitive integrity of the playoffs is good, right? That these teams have the teams that finished higher in the regular season standings are rewarded for that in a way that makes sense. That you're not talking about too much randomness in the system. This is something that Brian was very focused on when he conceived of his group stage idea, is to push away some of the randomness that comes with a one-off playoff format, a knockout style, which is dramatic, but sometimes ends up with teams that are not as good beating teams that are better and it not feeling right. Now, we can go back to last year. Now, obviously, it was over multiple games because MLS, in a bid to provide inventory to Apple, which is what we all believe is happening here, went to this 3-game format. Don't like it. I think it's weird. It doesn't feel like soccer, right? And I know that that's an arbitrary decision on my part in how I view it, but it doesn't feel like soccer to me. It does. MLS did do something similar way back in the day when it had 8 teams and 10 teams. Now we got 30. Why are we doing 3-game series in one round before we go to knockout style? But of course, Atlanta beat Miami. And you could just say, well, Miami didn't bring it. Miami didn't have the right focus. Miami didn't do the right things. They mishandled it. But it doesn't feel right that a ninth place team knocks off the Supporter Shield points record holder in the MLS Cup playoffs. So could a group stage work? Now, I'm going to leave it to you to go into again, because it gets granular. Like Brian Strauss's idea included having the top seed play all their games at home. So all 3 of their group stage matches will be at home. The second team in the group will get 2 home matches, obviously one of those away to the top seed. The third and fourth place teams, or the third place team rather, would get 1 home game, and then the fourth place team will get 0 home games. Have to go on the road. So that really loads up the advantage for finishing higher in the table. And then you play that group stage, again, 3 games, and hopefully you can get that done in a week. Right? In the League's Cup first phase, these teams are going to play 3 games in basically a week. They're going to play midweek now, on the weekend, and then midweek next week, and then they go into the knockout phase. And you could do something similar with the playoffs. Now, again, how the calendar switch affects all of this is an interesting consideration. And I do imagine that the talks are ongoing. The MLS collective bargaining agreement expires in 2027. The league will probably be targeting that year for whatever changes it wants to make to its format via calendar, via playoffs, via regular season. So I think that's probably where we're headed. Those kind of things have to be taken care of. And again, we are not talking about a little change. We are not talking about tweaks here or there. We're not talking about adding another DP slot, which is something people clamor for. We're not talking about getting rid of roster designations, which is something the Players Association definitely wants, so that more money can be spread across more of its players. We are talking about fundamental, ground-shaking changes to the way Major League Soccer has operated for the last 30 years. When you spend 30 years, and by the time we get this change, it could be 31, 32. When you play 30 years on the schedule Major League Soccer has played, that creates habits. Now, maybe we could argue MLS hasn't broken through to the mainstream, and there's lots of reasons that can be the case. Their decisions, their mistakes, the culture, sports in America. But even if you haven't broken through, quote unquote, you still have lots of people who have become fans of this league who are used to you playing in a certain way. Now, the playoff format has changed a billion times. Nobody's accustomed to that because we never get a time to get adjusted, but it is something to consider. All right. If you are not a subscriber to Morning Kick Around, become one now. Hit the button. Be a subscriber. Get notified when we're live on the air or when a new video goes up. We didn't do a live show on Monday because Robert was on vacation and I was doing radio, but I did post a conversation with Simon Evans from the Soccer Business about some of these MLS 3.0 things that came out of Austin. It's a very interesting conversation. Simon knows his stuff. So if you were a subscriber, you would have known that video dropped, even though we weren't live on Monday. You can also become a member, become an MK Ultra, get access to the Discord, get access to bonus content. I've taken to posting what I call the Daily Davis on the Morning Kick Around YouTube channel for our MK Ultras only. That's a little daily missive where I spit out a couple things that are on my mind. Sometimes it involves my life. and what it's like being me, I guess. I don't know why anybody would really care, but sometimes you got to get it out. So it helps me with that. So you can be a member and listen to me rambling and respond to some of those things. Sometimes I want that to be a back and forth. If you would like to give us a little bit of cash, but not do it through YouTube, you can go to coffee.com/morningkickaround and support us there. That is a great way to get us to our goal on Coffee, which is to be able to do a live remote show in 2026. We're saving up money, collecting money for that. That is the campaign over there. So go check that out. If you want to send us an email, you can do that at morningkickaround@gmail.com. Great way to just reach out and we'll respond. And I did mention socials, but we've got that too. MKickaround is what you need to look for. It's obviously a lot of letters. So MKickaround, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. I did create a TikTok, but we haven't posted yet. So that could be coming if you're on TikTok. Just got to figure out how to make videos. Right? We're going to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. And I also didn't mention that we're a podcast. You can listen to us via podcast wherever you get your podcasts, because sometimes watching video is not safe, or you just don't want to see people's faces, I guess. So you can get that there.